The night shift. The blood coming from the patient's neck wasn't red. It was black, thick as motor oil, and it moved like it was alive. Sarah Martinez had been an ER nurse at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago for 5 years, but she'd never seen anything like this. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of Trauma Bay 3, the substance gleamed with an oily sheen that made her stomach turn. The smell hit her next copper, mixed with something chemical, something wrong. "Dr. Chen, you need to see this," she called out, her voice steady, despite the chill running down her spine. The patient a Jane Doe brought in after a car accident on Lakeshore Drive lay unconscious on the gurney. Her vitals were impossible, heart rate bouncing between 30 and 180 BPM, temperature reading 94.2 degF 1 second and 103.8 degF the next. The monitors kept glitching, displaying symbols Sarah had never seen in any medical textbook. Dr. Chen rushed over but stopped dead when he saw the black substance. "What the hell?" The lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in that sickly emergency lighting that made everyone look like corpses. "Get me a sample," Dr. Chen ordered, but his hands were shaking as he reached for gloves. And call security. Tell them to lock down this wing." Sarah grabbed a specimen tube, but as she leaned closer to collect the sample, the patient's eyes snapped open. They were completely white, no iris, no pupil, just blank, white orbs that somehow seemed to be looking right through her. The woman's mouth opened and a voice that wasn't quite human whispered, "The door is opening." Then she flatlined. Chapter 1, The Pattern. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been normal. Sarah worked her usual night shifts, dealt with the typical Chicago ER chaos: gunshot wounds, overdoses, car accidents. She lived alone in a studio apartment in Lincoln Park, grabbed coffee at the same spot every morning, and video called her mum in Phoenix every Sunday. But then the first patient came in. Michael Torres, 34, admitted with what looked like a severe allergic reaction. His skin was covered in geometric patterns, perfect circles and triangles that seemed burned into his flesh. He kept mumbling about the watchers and the thin places. The attending physician diagnosed it as a psychotic break combined with self-harm, but Sarah noticed something the others missed. The patterns were too perfect, too precise. No human could have made those marks. She'd tried to follow up on Torres the next day, but his file had vanished from the system. When she asked about him, her supervisor Helen gave her a blank look. We didn't have any patient by that name yesterday. The security footage from that night corrupted. The second patient came in 5 days later. Lisa Wong, 28, found wandering Michigan Avenue at 3 a.m. in a hospital gown, but not from any hospital in the city. The gown had a logo none of them recognized, a caduceus wrapped around what looked like a key. She had no memory of how she got there, but she had the same geometric burns on her arms, and she said the same thing Torres had said, "The door is opening." Sarah started keeping her own records after that, hidden in her locker. Photos on her personal phone. Notes written in a composition notebook she bought at CVS. She wasn't crazy, something was happening at St. Mary's and someone was covering it up. The third patient was a kid. 8-year-old Marcus Williams, brought in by his terrified mother. He'd been speaking in a language no one could identify, drawing the same symbols over and over. His temperature was dropping dangerously low, but he showed no signs of hypothermia. His blood work came back with impossible results: cells that shouldn't exist, proteins that defied biology. That's when Sarah noticed Dr. Raymond Kellerman. Chapter 2, The Basement. Kellerman worked in the basement. Officially, he was part of the research department, but Sarah had never seen him interact with other staff. He only appeared when these strange cases came in, always wearing the same white coat with no ID badge, always carrying a black leather briefcase that he never let out of his sight. After Marcus Williams was transferred to another facility, No one could tell her which one Sarah decided to follow Kellerman. The basement of St. Mary's was a maze. Beyond the morgue and the maintenance areas, there were corridors that didn't appear on any hospital map. Sarah's key card shouldn't have worked down there, but somehow every door opened for her. The fluorescent lights gave way to older fixtures, incandescent bulbs that cast moving shadows on walls that looked far older than the rest of the building. She found Kellerman in a room that shouldn't exist. The walls were covered in the same symbols the patients had been drawing. In the center was a metal table with restraints, and on that table, Sarah had to bite her hand to keep from screaming. It was one of the missing patients, Lisa Wong. But she was wrong somehow. Her limbs were too long. Her fingers had too many joints, and her skin rippled like water. Kellerman stood over her with a syringe filled with that black substance. "Ah, Nurse Martinez," he said without turning around. "I wondered when you'd find your way here." Sarah backed toward the door, but it had closed behind her. The electronic lock clicked ominously. "Please don't be alarmed." Kellerman continued, finally facing her. His eyes were normal brown, tired human. "I'm trying to help them. To help all of us. What did you do to her?" "I didn't do anything. This is what's happening to them naturally. The boundary is weakening, you see, between our world and somewhere else. These people are the first to be affected. Their biology is changing, adapting to something that's coming through." He set down the syringe and pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Inside were photographs dating back decades. Patients with the same symptoms, the same geometric burns, the same impossible biology. 1953, 1971, 1989, 2007, he listed. "It happens in cycles. Each time a few people change. We contain them, study them, try to understand. But this time," he shook his head, "this time it's different. There are too many, and they're all saying the same thing." "The door is opening," Sarah whispered. "Yes, and I don't think we can close it this time." Lisa Wong's body convulsed on the table. When her mouth opened, a sound like static filled the room. Sarah could feel it in her teeth, in her bones. The symbols on the walls began to glow with a faint blue light. "We need to get out," Kellerman said, grabbing his briefcase. "Now." But it was too late. The lights went out completely, and in the darkness, Sarah heard something that made every instinct scream at her to run. The sound of something vast and impossible breathing in the walls. Chapter 3, The Truth. The emergency lights kicked in just as Lisa Wong sat up on the table. Her movements were wrong, too fluid, like her bones had turned to liquid. When she turned her head to look at them, it rotated a full 180 degrees. "Sarah," Lisa said. But it wasn't Lisa's voice. It was the voice of Michael Torres, and Marcus Williams, and a dozen others Sarah didn't recognize, all speaking in unison. "You need to see." The air in the room shimmered like heat waves off asphalt. Sarah felt her vision blur, and suddenly she wasn't in the basement anymore. She stood in a vast chamber made of the same black substance she'd seen in the patient's blood. The walls pulsed like living tissue. In the center of the chamber was a door not made of wood or metal, but of pure darkness outlined in that same blue light from the symbols. And there were things on the other side, waiting. "This is what they see." Kellerman's voice came from beside her, though she couldn't see him in this strange space. "Every patient who changes, they're connected to this place. It exists parallel to our reality, separated by the thinnest barrier. But that barrier is breaking down." Sarah watched in horror as shapes pressed against the door from the other side, shapes that hurt to look at, geometries that shouldn't exist in three-dimensional space. "Why?" she managed to ask. "Why is this happening?" "Because we called to them," Kellerman said. And now she could see him standing next to her in this nightmare realm. Not intentionally, But every radio wave, every electromagnetic pulse, every quantum experiment, we've been sending signals into dimensions we don't understand. And something answered. The door began to crack. Black liquid, the same substance from the patient, seeped through the fissures. "We need to wake up," Sarah said. "This isn't real. This can't be real. Reality is subjective." Lisa Wong's chorus of voices surrounded them. "You're about to learn how subjective." Sarah blinked and she was back in the basement room. But the walls were different now. She could see through them, see the otherworldly chamber superimposed over the physical space. Both realities existed simultaneously, bleeding into each other. Lisa Wong stood before them, but Sarah could see her true form underneath something that shifted and writhed, something that belonged to the realm beyond the door. "The first phase is complete," Lisa said. "The anchors are in place. When the door opens fully, your kind will adapt or perish. We're trying to help you adapt by turning people into monsters." Sarah backed against the wall, her hand finding the door handle. "By evolution," Lisa corrected. "Your bodies, your minds, they're not equipped for what's coming. But some of you are changing, becoming something that can survive in both worlds. You've seen them, Sarah. You've been chosen to see because you're one of them." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What?" Kellerman turned to her, his expression grim. "Why do you think you could access the basement? Why do you think you remembered the patients when everyone else forgot? You're changing too, Sarah. You have been since the moment you encountered the first patient." Sarah looked at her hands. They looked normal. But now she could see beneath the skin, see the way her cells were restructuring themselves, see the geometric patterns forming in her very DNA. "No, she whispered. "There's a choice," Kellerman said quickly. "I've been working on a way to reverse the process to sever the connection. But..." He hesitated. "But if we sever it for you, for all the affected, we lose our early warning system. We won't know when the door finally opens." "How long do we have?" Sarah asked. Lisa's many voices answered. "Days, maybe weeks. The convergence is accelerating." Chapter 4. The Resistance. Sarah made her choice. She wouldn't become one of them, but she wouldn't abandon the fight either. Kellerman's treatment was painful injections of a silver compound that burned like acid in her veins. It suppressed the changes, but didn't reverse them completely. She could still see into the other realm when she concentrated, still sense when new patients were about to arrive. Together, they formed an unlikely alliance. Kellerman revealed that he was part of a larger organization, doctors, scientists, and others who had been monitoring these incidents for decades. They called themselves the Threshold Group, and they had facilities hidden in hospitals across the world. "We've been preparing," he explained as they worked in a hidden lab 3 floors below the official basement, developing weapons barriers, anything that might work against entities from a dimension where our physics don't apply. Sarah became their early warning system. When she sensed a new patient coming, the Threshold team would intercept them before they could fully transform. Some they managed to save with Kellerman's treatment, others were too far gone. But the frequency was increasing. What had been one patient every few days became several per day. The geometric burns were appearing on people who hadn't even come to the hospital. The barrier wasn't just weakening, it was collapsing. Then came the night when Sarah sensed something different. Not a patient, something else. "Kellerman," she called, rushing into the lab. "Something's wrong. Something big is..." The lights throughout the entire hospital flickered and died. In the darkness, Sarah could see clearly into the other realm. The door wasn't just cracking anymore. It was opening. Chapter The Breach. Emergency power kicked in throughout St. Mary's, but it wasn't enough. Reality itself was glitching. Walls phased in and out of existence. Gravity worked differently in certain corridors. And staff members were beginning to change, not slowly like the patients, but rapidly, violently. Sarah watched in horror as a security guard's body elongated, his skeleton restructuring itself into something arthropod-like. A janitor's skin turned translucent, revealing organs that pulsed with bioluminescent light. "The door is open," they all said in unison. "The convergence begins." Kellerman grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get to the main lab. There's a contingency, something we've been developing. It might be able to close the door, but..." A sound like tearing metal echoed through the hospital. In the other sight Sarah couldn't turn off, she saw them, the entities from beyond the door. They moved through the walls like smoke, each one a different impossibility. Some were geometric patterns given consciousness. Others were concepts made flesh-living equations, personified paradoxes. One of them noticed her watching. It moved toward her. And Sarah understood with terrible clarity that human minds weren't meant to perceive such things directly. Her nose began to bleed. Her vision fractured into kaleidoscope patterns. Kellerman pulled her into a stairwell. "Don't look at them directly. Use your peripheral vision. And whatever you do, don't let them touch you." They descended into the true basement levels that predated the hospital, that predated Chicago itself. The Threshold Group had built their most important facility here at one of the world's natural weak points between dimensions. The main lab was in chaos. Scientists and doctors ran between equipment. Sarah couldn't begin to understand machines that seemed to bend space around them. Computers displaying equations in languages that hurt to read. Dr. Kellerman, a woman in a hazmat suit, rushed over. "The Chicago site is compromised, but we're getting similar reports from London, Tokyo, Sao Paulo. It's happening everywhere at once." "Then we proceed with Protocol 7, Kellerman said grimly. "That's never been tested. We don't know if..." "We're out of options, Dr. Patel." Sarah grabbed his arm. "What's Protocol 7? Kellerman led her to the center of the lab where a massive device hummed with energy. It looked like a fusion of technology and something organic metal intertwined with what might have been nerve tissue. "A dimensional anchor," he explained. "If we can't close the door, maybe we can lock it in a partially open state, prevent full convergence, but someone needs to activate it from the other side." "The other side?" Sarah's heart sank. "You mean someone has to cross over?" "Take the anchor's resonance key to the door itself. Plant it. The journey will complete their transformation. They'll become like the entities. There's no coming back." The lab shook as something massive moved through the hospital above them. Cracks appeared in the reinforced ceiling, leaking that black substance. "I'll do it," Sarah said. "No." Kellerman shook his head. "I've been exposed longer. My transformation is further along. He stopped mid-sentence. Black veins were spreading across his neck, his skin taking on that oily sheen. But it was happening too fast, too violently. This wasn't the slow change of the patients. "No," he gasped, falling to his knees. "Something's wrong. They're accelerating the process. They know what we're planning." Sarah watched in horror as Kellerman's body began to warp. But unlike the others, he was fighting it, using every ounce of will to maintain his human form. "Take it," he gasped, pressing a small device into her hand, the resonance key. "You're the only one who can do this. You've been walking between worlds since the beginning. That's why you could see. That's why you remembered. You're not becoming one of them, you're something else. Something new. I don't understand. The door opens both ways, Sarah. They're trying to come here, but what if? What if some of us are meant to go there to be ambassadors? Bridges. You're not infected, you're evolved." The transformation overcame him then. His body dissolved into geometric patterns that hurt to look at, then reformed into something that wasn't quite solid, wasn't quite energy. But his eyes were still human when he looked at her one last time. "Save both worlds," he said, and then he was gone, scattered into the quantum foam. Chapter 6, The Choice. Sarah stood at the threshold between worlds. Around her, reality was coming apart at the seams. The hospital had become a maze of overlapping dimensions. She passed through corridors that led to impossible spaces, operating rooms that opened onto alien vistas, elevator shafts that descended into living darkness. The entities were everywhere now, but they didn't attack her. They watched, waiting. She found the door in what had once been the emergency room where it all started. It stood in the center of the trauma bay, a gap in existence itself, edges lined with that electric blue light. Through it, she could see the other realm clearly now. It wasn't the nightmarish hellscape she'd expected. It was beautiful in a way that human words couldn't describe. Cities of living mathematics, oceans of pure thought, beings that existed as harmony itself. But it was wrong for this world. The two realities were incompatible at a fundamental level. That's why people were transforming their bodies, were trying to exist in both states simultaneously and failing. One of the entities approached her. Up close, she could see it more clearly. It had been human once. She could see the echo of human features in its shifting form. "We didn't mean for this," it said, its voice like crystalline wind chimes. "We heard your signals. We thought you were inviting us. We've been trying to prepare you to help you adapt, by turning us into you, by trying to find a middle ground. But we see now there isn't one. Our kinds cannot coexist in the same space. The door should never have been opened." Sarah held up the resonance key. "This will lock it. Keep it partially open but prevent full convergence. Both worlds survive but separate, with a barrier between them forever." "Not forever," Sarah said, surprising herself. "Until we're ready. Until both sides understand each other better. This doesn't have to be the end, it can be a pause." The entity studied her with senses she couldn't comprehend. "You're different from the others. You exist in both states but belong to neither. A living paradox." "Story of my life," Sarah said with a bitter laugh. "You could come with us. On our side of the door, you wouldn't be torn between states. You would be whole." Sarah looked back at the chaos of the hospital, at the world she'd known falling apart. Then she looked through the door at the alien paradise beyond. "Someone needs to plant this on your side," she said, "and someone needs to activate it from this side, to make sure the lock holds. A guardian for each door," the entity understood, "but the one who crosses over won't be human anymore." "I know." Sarah took a deep breath. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe that's what we need, someone who understands both sides. Someone who can prepare for the day when we're ready to open the door properly." She thought of her mother in Phoenix, who she'd never see again. Her apartment in Lincoln Park. Coffee at her favorite shop. All the little human things she'd lose. But then she thought of all the patients she'd seen transform. All the people who would die if the convergence completed. Both worlds would be destroyed. "I'll need someone on this side," she said. "Someone to activate the anchor after I cross." "I will do it," Lisa Wong said, stepping out of the chaos. But it wasn't the transformed Lisa, it was her human form, somehow restored. The process can be reversed at the threshold. Some of us are choosing to stay human, to remember, to prepare. Sarah nodded. She handed Lisa the activation device, keeping the resonance key. "Tell my mom." She stopped. What could she possibly say? "I'll tell her you saved the world," Lisa said. "Both worlds." Sarah stepped toward the door. Each step felt like shedding layers of herself, her human fears, her physical limitations, her three-dimensional thinking. By the time she reached the threshold, she could feel the change beginning. But it wasn't painful. It was like finally being able to breathe after holding her breath her whole life. She turned back one last time. The hospital was stabilizing. The entities were withdrawing. The staff who hadn't transformed were helping those who had partially changed. "Thank you," she said to Lisa, though the words came out in harmonics. Human ears couldn't properly hear. Then she stepped through. Chapter 7, The Other Side. The transformation was instantaneous and eternal. Sarah felt herself unfold across dimensions she hadn't known existed. Her consciousness expanded, able to perceive time as a navigable dimension, to see the probability streams of countless futures. But at her core, she was still Sarah Martinez. Still the night shift nurse who noticed when things were wrong. Still the woman who chose to help rather than flee. The realm beyond the door was even more incredible from within. She could see now that the entities weren't invaders. They were explorers. Scientists, beings driven by curiosity, just like humans. They had detected Earth's electromagnetic emissions and interpreted them as an invitation to connect. She found the focal point of the door, a crystalline structure that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. The resonance key in her hand was it still a hand hummed with complementary frequencies. "Are you ready?" the entity who had spoken to her asked. Here she could see its true form, a symphony of light and thought that had once been a physicist from Prague transformed during the 89 incident. Will it hurt them, the humans? The separation will be felt by those who are partially transformed. But they will heal. Both worlds will heal. Sarah approached the crystalline structure. As she placed the resonance key, she felt the connection between worlds shudder. On the other side, Lisa would be activating the anchor. The door began to solidify, not closing but becoming fixed. A permanent window between worlds that neither side could fully pass through. But information could pass. Knowledge. Understanding. We'll be ambassadors, Sarah realized. Those of us who crossed over. We can communicate through the barrier, help both sides learn about each other. Until the day comes when we can meet properly, the entity agreed. When both species have evolved enough to coexist. Sarah felt the lock engage. Reality stabilized. The crisis was over, but her work was just beginning. Epilogue 5 years later. Lisa Wong stood in the basement of St. Mary's Hospital, now officially the Kellerman Institute for Dimensional Studies. The room that had once been a hidden laboratory was now a legitimate research facility, though only a select few knew its true purpose. Before her, the monitoring equipment showed stable readings. The barrier between worlds held firm. The incidents had stopped. No more transformations, no more reality distortions. But they weren't idle. On both sides of the door, work continued. Humans studied the fragments of knowledge that filtered through. The entities with Sarah as their liaison learned about human nature, human fears, human potential. Any word from her? Dr. Patel asked, entering with the daily reports. Lisa smiled, touching the special receiver they'd developed. It could pick up transdimensional harmonics messages from the other side. Every day, she said. She says they're making progress, teaching each other. She's even retained enough humanity to complain about missing Chicago pizza. Could she ever come back? Not physically. But she says that's okay. She's where she needs to be. Lisa looked at the wall where the symbols had once glowed. Now they were properly translated, not warnings or threats, but greetings. Mathematical poetry from a species that had tried to say hello the only way they knew how. On her desk was a letter she'd written to Sarah's mother. She'd told her the cover story that Sarah had taken a position with Doctors Without Borders, in a region without reliable communication. It was easier than the truth. But every month Lisa visited Mrs. Martinez, bringing her updates about her daughter's work helping people in remote areas. It wasn't entirely a lie. Sarah was helping people, just not in any way her mother could understand. The receiver chimed. A new message was coming through. Lisa put on the headphones and heard Sarah's voice changed, but recognizable human words carried on in human frequencies. Tell them we're ready to begin phase 2. Small exchanges. Art for art. Music for mathematics. Baby steps. And Lisa, tell my mom I love her. Tell her I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Lisa smiled, tears in her eyes. The door between worlds might be locked, but it wasn't sealed. And someday, maybe not in her lifetime, but someday it would open properly. When it did, humanity would be ready, and Sarah Martinez, the night shift nurse who noticed when things were wrong, would be waiting on the other side to welcome them home. Author's note: in the weeks following the Chicago incident, similar events were contained at 12 hospitals worldwide. The Threshold Group, now operating openly as the Kellerman Institute, monitors the barrier constantly. 47 individuals crossed over before the door was locked. They call themselves the Bridge Generation humans who chose transformation to save both worlds. They work tirelessly on the other side, preparing for eventual contact. Among the medical staff, Sarah Martinez is remembered as a hero who disappeared during the crisis. A small plaque in the St. Mary's break room reads, "For Sarah, who always worked the hard shifts, Lisa Wong continues to receive messages." The exchanges grow more complex each year. Philosophical treatises, mathematical proofs, even what might be jokes. Humor apparently doesn't translate well across dimensional barriers. The official report lists the incidents as a mass hallucination caused by a chemical leak. The truth is known to fewer than 1,000 people worldwide. But late at night in hospitals around the world, nurses working the night shift sometimes see things that don't quite belong. They've been trained now how to recognize the signs, who to call, how to help without fear. Because the door is locked, but it's still there. And somewhere beyond it, Sarah Martinez keeps watch, ensuring it opens only when the time is right. The night shift continues.